Success in Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
The date is Monday, March 31st. This wonderful month is almost in the can, and no Monday would be complete without Andrew Hoffman. Andy, we've got a lot to cover today, don't we?
Yes, extra segment.
Extra segment. It's already baked into the cake, just like California inflation.
Good segue.
Yeah.
Especially as we're talking about food. I was in California this week for a conference in San Diego, and I've actually spent a lot of time in San Diego over the years for personal and business reasons. So I've witnessed the change, and it's not just San Diego, but California's inflation is so much worse than the rest of the country across the board, from their real estate, from their income taxes to what they're paying for gasoline, to what they're paying for food. And of course, all what the environmentalists have done to the cost of living in general. And I really believe that this is the poster child of what's going to happen in this country. It's no surprise that California has the worst credit rating in the country. It has the most debt. It has the highest unemployment. And of course, with these droughts now, which are causing surging food prices, and California is the largest farming state in the country, it could be cataclysmic. And as we were talking before this call, people don't even believe when I say this number. Just in the last 3 months, meaning since the beginning of the year, across the board, food prices in this country are up almost 20%. And gasoline prices during the non-driving season are up more than 10%. But there's no inflation.
Well, I know what you're saying about food prices is absolutely true. And restaurant prices, I would tell you, are up 40 to 50%, Andy. You go to restaurants and you don't order a glass of wine and the prices are up 50%. You go to a mediocre restaurant for 2 people, it's over $100, and yet they're packed, and nobody seems to know what's going on here except you and me. Everyone else seems oblivious to these prices going up, and it's just shocking. I'll tell you.
Well, I wouldn't say that restaurants are packed. I think restaurants in general have been doing terribly. From McDonald's, which has reported historically actually negative same-store sales numbers. It really depends on what restaurant you're talking about. If you're talking about the high end where the 1% go is doing just fine. But for the rest of the nation, I mean, you look at the companies like Applebee's and Olive Garden, they're doing absolutely horrible across the board. And of course, the fast food is as telling as it gets because fast food is just too expensive. I mean, some of these companies are getting rid of their cheap menus. On top of that, we have February was the biggest beef price increase in 1 month since 2003. Beef, chicken, milk, bacon, these are all at all-time highs. People can't afford to go to McDonald's anymore just for a casual meal, and McDonald's can't afford to sell at casual prices anymore.
Yeah, I guess I'm talking about those higher end places, and I'm down here in Florida where the Northerners come down, and these restaurants in the area here are all packed. Like, you cannot believe, I'm telling you. And they open new ones, and those are packed. So my view is a little bit jaded, but yeah, the McDonald's, the lower end, the Walmart type, you're right. They're doing badly.
I mean, where the majority of people would go out to dinner are doing historically bad. But again, you know, you look at the car sales are abysmal, and the channel stuffing at General Motors is all-time high, and yet Ferrari and Porsche and Maserati are reporting all-time high sales. This is the all-time wealth inequality poster child of history right here. I mean, we're talking about at least of a civilized nation. I'm not talking about like feudalism. But pretty soon it's going to become feudalism. That's why my buddy Mike Krieger says, calls us serfs all the time.
Yeah, we're part of the surf club.
Right, surf club.
Hey, and Janet Yellen, in 1 week, She is totally singing a different tune, isn't she, Andy?
Well, she never changed her tune. The tune has always been the same. We will continue to print money. We have been and we will continue to do so. And of course, if you do the math, you realize that they've been printing a lot more than they say anyway. But the fact is, she had her meeting last week and she pretty much said, the economy is not good. We're going to continue to stimulate. We're going to keep interest rates at 0% long after tapering ends, assuming tapering ends, of course. And here she is this morning giving another speech saying the unemployment is far worse than we need it to be for the economy to be running smoothly, et cetera, et cetera. And, so they run up stocks and bonds. And of course, on first delivery day at the COMEX, they hit gold, paper gold at the same times every day. Do you know that the COMEX gold registered inventories, which are a measly 637,000 ounces, have not changed in over a month? There's got to be something like 500,000 ounces still standing for delivery from the prior three contracts. And then you have the current one, which settles first delivery date is today. And it never changes ever. It's like what people believe the Federal Reserve, they believe the COMEX. We were talking before about the physical demand going on in the world is literally astronomical right now, Kerry. If you want to go to a break right now, or I can go right into it.
Yeah, well, let's go into those physical delivery numbers. It's really shocking.
Yeah, I mean, in China, remember, 2012 was the previous record for imports into Hong Kong. And of course, the numbers are a lot larger than that because it's only Hong Kong that's reported. But last year, 2013 doubled 2012's record. And for the first 2 months of this year, we're already 30% above that record. And in in Japan, where people are getting really scared now of Abenomics, this largest jewelry chain in the country said that Thursday was their biggest day in 120 years of business because people are lining up 3 hours out the door to buy gold bars. And then you have the best one of all, the U.S. Mint, where U.S. Eagle sales last year shattered the 2011 record. And this year, we're 25% above that level, even though they've been rationing something like 1.1 or 1.2 million coins a week. And remember, last year we sold a record 7.5 million ounces in January. This year, it was only about 4.5 million because of the rationing. And yet, after just 3 months of the year, we're 25% ahead of last year's pace. That's how much demand there is for the real stuff. And so when you see this historic, and I mean, we're talking about now 32 out of the last 33 Sunday nights they've attacked gold in what I call a Sunday night sentiment attack. Now we're at, I think it's 190 out of the last 215 trading days they've attacked at the open of the paper market in London. And then, this 12 o'clock Eastern cap of last resort, as I call it, is just getting off the charts. I'd say it was probably 99% of the days. Today's news was the PMI number was way below expectations. And Janet Yellen is making her talk about how there's not enough employment. And so, sure enough, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, gold gets smashed, Dow up 140 points, and Treasury bonds soaring. It's incredible to watch them try to distort reality with all this paper. I mean, all you had to do is watch Michael Lewis on 60 Minutes last night talking about how the markets are rigged. It couldn't be more obvious. And fortunately, that's why we own physical gold and silver, because the one thing that they can't create out of thin air is physical gold and silver.
Yeah, if they could, they certainly would, wouldn't they?
They've tried alchemy, the philosopher's stone. None of that stuff worked.
Good old Merlin, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's so absurd, It's just, you watch it and you just shake your head and, you got to wonder. But Nasdaq was really about to crash and burn. And you have to wonder if Yellen's happy talk was aimed at bailing out Nasdaq, don't you?
Well, look, I mean, we have, as I wrote last week, what's the name of the article? Can't remember anymore. I'm losing my mind. We have all-time, anatomy of a bubble. We right now have all-time high margin debt, okay, on the New York Stock Exchange. Twice as high as the top in 2000. If you can imagine, and you remember the environment, not just the stock market and the retail participation and the internet stocks and all that, but just how happy people were about their lives and the stock market in general, compared to today, where we have record food stamps, record real unemployment, record misery index, record debt. I mean, you couldn't think of a worse scenario on a global basis. And yet, to think that there's twice as much margin debt shows you just what a colossal bubble that the Fed has created with their money printing and with the PPT. So, yes, the Nasdaq last week started to try to do what it should be doing, which is crash these ridiculously overpriced stocks on all historical metrics in a bad economic environment. So, this is what they do. They just keep coming back with more money printing and more propping up the stock market. I mean, again, that's why I'm not in mining shares anymore. They literally can make any paper market any price they want, but they can't make physical oil, which is trading at near record highs. At least gasoline is around the world. They can't make gold and silver. They can't create copper or wheat or any real item of value in this world.
Yeah, they haven't figured out how to do that yet, have they?
No, and again, you look at the food prices we're talking about. I mean, historic surges in food prices at the worst possible time. And then to have the Federal Reserve saying we're going to keep rates low for extended periods of time because inflation is too low. I mean, I was writing today about all the taxes that have increased, which of course don't go into the inflation rates. I wrote last week how my homeowner's insurance has doubled in 7 years. Pretty much you name anything in life that you need to live on, and it's not just increasing, it's exploding higher.
Exactly, and we're going to talk more about this up next on the Financial Survival Network. We're talking with Andrew Hoffman.
FSN Radio.
When your accountant wants tax-free income, this is what he does. Accountants know the law. They also know that any American could legally get paid up to 3 times per month, 100% tax-free. That's 36 tax-free checks each year. It doesn't matter what you make already. This simple strategy could work for anyone. Go to www.irsrevenge2.com to learn how. That's irsrevenge2.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And we're back on the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. We're talking with Andrew Hoffman. Andy, so what's next on the hit parade? How long can they keep the illusion going? We've got record high margin debt, got horrible hedge fund performance, and then look what's going on in Japan.
Yeah, well, look, God, I can't remember everything we've talked about in this call. Let's start with Japan, okay? Abenomics is now officially a year over. It's halfway through its 2-year goal of doubling the money supply. And again, I looked at the money supply numbers that the U.S. Fed puts out on Japan, and it shows the Japanese money supply up 10%. How can that be when they've said we are QEing at a rate that will double the money supply in 2 years? Again, it just lies across the board. But either way, even the Japanese with their quote deflation just reported a 5-year high in inflation on Friday. At the same time, by the way, that they announced a record trade deficit, a 2.5% drop in consumer spending to who knows how many year low, a 2.5% drop in industrial production. And don't forget, tomorrow, as in 1 day from now, is when that national sales tax rate increases from 5% to 8%, and then next year to 10%, amidst this all-time terrible Japanese economy and demographics. That's just Japan. And by the way, have you seen the yen this morning approaching new multi-year lows? So they are, I really believe hyperinflation in Japan, they're going to be the first, quote, civilized nation to experience in the 21st century. Then you have in Europe where the calls for QE or the OMT or negative interest rates are getting so loud that I think the odds are almost in their favor of being announced on Thursday at the ECB's meeting. So, you just have across the board misery. I'm looking for the bright light, but there isn't any. And there won't be any until the entire fiat currency system collapses, because it's a Ponzi scheme which will continue to expand until it's no more.
People always say we're living in a Keynesian world, Andy, and yet Keynes never advocated what's being done today. You know that, right?
Well, without knowing directly what he said, he just generally it was a general arrogance where he believed that governments could do things better than the private market. But of course, he certainly couldn't have imagined something like this.
No, this debasement on a massive scale, that was not what he advocated. He advocated cutting taxes during a depression, recession, and increasing fiscal stimulus. You know, he never advocated increasing taxes during a depression. In fact, he said that that was suicidal and would only lead to bad things occurring, which we've seen exactly that happen. So this type of thing is insane. And look, it's going to have a bad outcome. You know it, and I know it. But hey, the insanity of man. Hey, you know, one thing we forgot to mention is it's the 1 year anniversary of Cyprus.
Yes. Isn't it funny how back then it was considered a one-time event, and now, I mean, everyone from the United States and England and Australia and on has talked about this, and the European Central Bank as if, yeah, this is how the way it's going to be. The IMF with their paper just a month ago, of course, there's going to be bail-ins. In fact, they just did a bail-in in Ukraine last week. It's ubiquitous. I mean, again, people used to think of their, quote, savings as the money they put in their bank. It earned interest. Inflation, the inflation genie hadn't really woken up yet because it took some time after we went off the gold standard. Banks didn't get busted and bailed out, and they certainly didn't bail in. And now that's what I'm trying to tell people what physical gold and silver are. I mean, if you're going to earn no money, no interest, you might as well earn something that's going to hold its value and is scarce in value and can't be bailed out or bailed in, and is going to hedge against inflation over time.
Yeah, and what was a one-off event is going to become the norm, right?
It's only a matter of time in the quote civilized world.
Yeah, and yet, how many people out there you really think are actually buying gold and silver, Andy?
Well, none, and that's what's so amazing about the U.S. Mint numbers, because since basically in the past year, with this just maniacal attacking of gold and silver on a daily basis and the dropping of the stock market, you know, people have really been lulled to sleep. And, you know, we've talked about in our business how many of our competitors have gone under because of either low volume or scams, or you know, like Tolving, he had to close shop and he's a fugitive from the law. And there's a lot of bait and switching that was been going on in this business. It's been really bad in this business, and yet Silver Eagle demand is just shattering records year after year, which just shows you that the people who are buying these things are from out of this country. There are definitely people in the world who understand. These people lining up in Japan because they're scared of Abenomics, the people in China who are buying hand over fist, and whoever it is that's calling up the U.S. Mint and causing them to ration silver on a weekly basis. But eventually it'll come right back to the West. It's been here before several times in the last few years. But the next time it comes, it's not going to be people just that are going to be buying because of greed. It's going to be because of fear.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. I mean, it's just, this insanity is just crazy. It's just really crazy. And it can only go on for so long, right? And then at some point, I would like to think that man regains his sense of propriety and better times are ahead. But the question is, how long can it go on for, Andy?
Well, look, I've said it all along. I mean, the system is so hopelessly broken. I believe that it will eventually correct itself, but not because a bunch of people get together and have a meeting. The system has to be flushed out. The bad debt, the bad policies, the bad politicians, the insolvent banks. It's going to be historic in nature. And when the dust settles, we'll start all over again, just like has have happened countless times throughout history.
Yeah, it's just a question of when this day of reckoning is going to occur. That's what I'd like to know, but it has to happen at some point, right?
Well, I wrote the article, Draghi's Reckoning Day, because remember back in July 2012, he said, we'll do whatever it takes to save the euro. And he threw his OMT on the table, and And but thanks to that threat and the Fed's crazy money printing and propping the stock markets, he hasn't had to at least overtly use it. I'm sure he's done it covertly, that's for sure. But now we're at the point where they're out there overtly talking about we got to do something because they're calling. I wrote a piece called "Deflation and Recovery." They're just hyping that deflation card because they're desperate to turn the printing presses on with the OMT. And meanwhile, people in Europe spending $9 a gallon on gasoline.
Yeah, and we'll be there soon at the rate we're going, right?
Either because of inflation or socialism, one or the other, or both.
Yeah, and how much longer, though? That's the question everybody wants to know, and that's the question we can't answer, can we?
No, and that's why we hold the only asset that will survive through everything. I mean, you look at Bitcoin and everyone gets all excited about it, where it ran up because of speculation, back down to 450. Gold's just, even in its biggest smash ever, sitting up at 1,300, just waiting and waiting. Below its cost of production. Silver at $20, below its cost of production. Nowhere to go but up over time, and probably a very short time, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just a question of when, and we've been through these periods before. It's really, it just amazes me the delusions that mankind goes through, and this is just yet another episode of it, right?
Yeah, and but again, you said we've been through these times before, but we haven't been through one like this, where the entire world is on a global fiat currency standard, and where one nation with its technology, and I mean its high frequency trading and algorithms and derivatives, has had the ability to literally make market paper prices whatever they want all the time. It's created the most incredible distortion between reality of financial markets and the reality of the real world of the economy and of physical gold that we've ever seen in history. And so when it does blow, which it will, as all these things always do, and it can't be much longer now, in my view, in the big scheme of things, it's going to be historic, is the best way I could put it.
Yeah, historic. And how is Humpty Dumpty going to put it all together?
That's right. It'll be rise from the ashes is just the best way I could put it. It's not gonna be fixed. It's gonna be crashed and then restarted. And I don't mean crashed on purpose. I mean the system will implode. It has to. It's doing it right now. Anyone who's watching what's going on right now with global economies and currencies and the civil unrest, I mean, it's happening now. Look at all the countries that are experiencing major inflation surges right now. Venezuela is the perfect example of it. A lot of South American nations, Argentina, Brazil, you've seen it in India and Indonesia. I mean, these are real countries. Russia, ruble is at a record low. I mean, big things going on.
Big things. And we got more to talk about on the Financial Survival Network. We're speaking with Andrew Hoffman, and more on the countries blowing up next.
FSN Radio.
Warning, you might live in a no-constitution zone. It's the shocking story you won't see on TV. Depending upon where you live in the United States, you may no longer have constitutional rights. Politicians are quietly squeezing the middle class to micromanage you and extract your wealth. Want to see how? Watch the free video at noconstitutionzone.com. Soon, you'll have the last laugh by using these cultural contraband tricks and profit like a king. That's noconstitutionzone.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
We are back with Andrew Hoffman on the Financial Survival Network. So, Andy, what about what's going on here in China? Big write-offs taking place. Banking sector more and more appears to be insolvent. Now we understand why they've been shipping off boatloads of money to the United States, Vancouver, Australia, why they've been moving their families out, because the head security chief there, they just took $14 billion from his family. They just grabbed it from them. And I'm sure his family, the security chief, wasn't doing anything else that the rest of the whole communist hierarchy wasn't doing as well.
Well, China is, I mean, it has to be the most corrupt country, at least per capita, with 1.5 billion people and such a small group running it. But again, the corruption isn't even the issue. It's just the misinvestment, starting with the pegging of the yuan to the dollar 20 years back. It's just, I mean, I shouldn't say it's stolen the jobs. The jobs would have gone there anyway because they had the cheap labor. And the U.S. corporations and politicians handed them a lot of them over in their quest for profits and reelection. But the fact is that yuan pegging was a big reason why so much investment was sent over to China, and caused it to overinvest. And of course, the PBOC just fostered that and allowed this ridiculous shadow banking system to explode, particularly since 2008, in its kind of covert way of contributing to the world money printing orgy. Now, the fruits of its labor are coming to roost. You are literally seeing an unraveling of the greatest, I believe, the greatest construction and real estate and credit bubble of all time. I mean, putting the United States and Western Europe to shame. We're talking about $14 trillion was loaned by private entities, non-regulated, in the past 5 years, mostly to build ghost cities and I should say they don't have houses, they have apartment buildings over there. And right now there's literally zero credit coming out. The PBOC is printing like a house of fire, and they're going to continue to do so. And now they're actually letting the yuan ban weaken, which all the idiot Western bankers have bet $500 billion it would strengthen. And they're letting it weaken so that they can further destroy the global economy and take whatever jobs are still left.
Hey, and something I want to talk about, because I kind of disagree with your associate, Bill Halter, over this, that, hey, they're happy because they're building ghost cities. So when the whole economy collapses, they're still going to have cities. But, you know, the thing is, when you have real estate and nobody's living in it, it deteriorates very quickly. That's not a good thing to have real estate that's empty.
Well, I don't recall Bill writing that. Maybe he said that.
Yeah.
But the point is, there's nothing good about having excess real estate in any way, aside from the upkeep costs, which are neglected. Mm-hmm. Permanently keeps prices down. And remember, all of this construction of these ghost cities was done on credit, mostly by the private sector. So these people are all going bankrupt. And what do bankrupt entities do? They sell their assets. And the Chinese people, they gamble in real estate the way Americans gambled in internet stocks back in the year 1999 with heavy leverage. That's where all this lending comes in. And when the prices go down, they're going to have to start selling too. So and again, it's not like America doesn't have cities. The problem is the people in them are broke.
Yeah, exactly. So China's really got a day of reckoning of its own, especially because their inhabitants, the people who've been making the money, not necessarily the billionaires and the multimillionaires, but the middle class, they believe that, the economy is not supposed to go down. We're not supposed to lose money on our investments. And now they're getting a huge wake-up call. Oops, we're losing money on our investments. That's not supposed to happen. And who are they going to hold accountable? But the powers that be. There's going to be some serious civil unrest as a result of the billions, hundreds of billions, even the trillions that they're going to lose here.
Yeah, it'd be one thing if they had a small population, but that's the point. China does everything like try to lure all these jobs and allow all this building because they've got 1.5 billion people to feed. The problem is once the cycle turns, as you said, people lose money and they got to figure out a way to feed them. And the only way to feed them is going to be to try to print money. And they're already communists. They'll go more communist, but all that does is create inflation. When you already have record unemployment and record food prices, it only makes things worse. And yes, I've said it on your show many times before, it's not the current Chinese government that's going to be in charge when the system crashes and the Chinese yuan is revalued based on all the gold it has. It's going to crash in China too. And after the ashes rise, when the phoenix rises from the ashes, It will be a new government that reaps the benefit. These people will be cleaned out just like the U.S. government, the European government, the Japanese government. So they're just doing whatever can kicking they can as well. And of course, they know that they have all this money to spend, unlike everyone else. So they're smart enough to buy gold and items of real value with it. But it's not going to be them that are around to claim victory.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it really comes down to, is that there will be a new ruling party. And in fact, I don't think it'll be a party. I think that the whole power structure will be upended, and we're going to see something totally different in every country.
Worldwide, we're going to see something totally different. That's for sure.
Yeah, hopefully for the better, but not convinced over that. And yeah,
look, there's a difference between what we're going to see in the interim and what we ultimately see. These are two different things, obviously.
Yeah, much different, and we can only hope that it'll be for the better, because, right. But right now the corruption and just, Michael Lewis, I think, is probably the best financial writer of our time. You read his books, The Big Short, The New Thing, and Liar's Poker.
I read Liar's Poker a long time ago.
Yeah, and really what he's done in these books is chronicle the turning point in the financial system each time with them. He didn't know, I don't think he knew what he was doing when he did it, but they were brilliant, these books, and he chronicled them. And now with this book, which I got to get, Flashpoint, he's just a brilliant writer, a really talented writer, and he brings these things to life, which the average American really can't understand what's going on, but he actually explains them in a way that you can. And not particularly the nicest guy out there either, but his writing unequaled, and the brilliance. I mean, his story when he covered the new thing and the evolution of Netscape and the internet, that was a turning point in the financial system in America, not for the better, as it turned out. And then he chronicles it, and just the brilliance of the guy. So got to check it out.
He's telling stories that aren't far different from what I saw. Remember, Larry's Poker is about what he experienced at Salomon Brothers in the late 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
I was at Salomon Smith Barney from in the late 90s, and it was the same thing, except on a much worse level. Of course, what both of us saw is nothing compared to what's going on now, because Wall Street is no longer Wall Street. It's now a government entity that has inside information and does high frequency trading and does the government's bidding at auctions and manipulating markets. And as a result, they never lose money.
Yeah, funny how that works. And
actually, I take it back. They never report net losses. Of course, their cash flow is a lot different. They don't have the cash flow because they're only reporting paper profits. That's why they need the permanent zero interest rates from the Fed to stay solvent and, of course, pay themselves record bonuses.
That's the key. All about the bonuses. And that was the transition from Wall Street being partnerships with partners, capital at stake, where you went to the street every day and risked your personal fortune. Then the whole rigging thing occurred, where the bond market was rigged, where Salomon basically rigged the U.S. bond market, and then Buffett got involved with the supposed bailout. There was a whole bunch of things that occurred after that. And, Liar's Poker really played a role in that whole thing. It was really interesting. I find Lewis fascinating character in his own right. And I don't think he set out to actually change things, but he did have a role in it. So kind of gotten off the topic a bit, but the financial system, he confirms it. Every aspect, every market, 24/7. is rigged. That can go on for so long, but eventually the financial underpinnings, the financial realities will assert themselves, and those are bankruptcy and negative equity. There is no equity left in the system, and that's what people always forget about, Andy, is you must have some equity someplace. You can't just have pure leverage and pure debt. There must be equity in the system to keep it afloat, right?
The only equity is in the fake accounting that these guys put out, especially when you're considering all the off-balance sheet stuff that's going on. And again, that's why they have to do zero interest rates forever, because they need to keep giving free money to the banks to cover the fact that they have no equity.
Yep, great point. On that note, Andy, we will bid you adieu. We'll talk to you next week, and keep up the fight.
I will. Thanks a lot.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.